I watched in disbelief as my belongings were thrown into a cardboard box in front of the entire office. The CEO's cruel laughter echoed through the conference room as security escorted me out like a common criminal. They thought they had destroyed me completely. But what happened when I returned just hours later changed everything for these corporate bullies forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. If you've ever been humiliated at work and thought your career was over, this story will shock you to your core. Stay until the end to see how one moment of corporate cruelty led to the most incredible comeback in business history. Hi, I'm Sarah, and I need to tell you about the day that started as my worst nightmare but ended as my greatest triumph. It was a Tuesday morning that began with me believing I was finally getting the recognition I deserved, but ended with me discovering just how powerful love and loyalty can be when someone tries to destroy the person you care about most. This story still gives me goosebumps every time I think about it, because it showed me that sometimes your darkest hour is just before your greatest breakthrough. Let me take you back to the beginning. I've always been what people would call a dedicated worker. While others were networking at happy hours, I was staying late to perfect presentations. While my colleagues were playing office politics, I was focused on delivering results that spoke for themselves. I believed that hard work and integrity would eventually pay off. I had no idea how naive that belief would make me appear to certain people. For 3 years, I had been working as a marketing director at Wellington Industries, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the city. I poured my heart and soul into that job, working weekends, skipping vacations, and treating every project like it was the most important thing in the world. My performance reviews were stellar, my clients loved me, and I had single-handedly brought in over $2 million in new business during my time there. But there was one person who seemed determined to make my life miserable, and that was Victoria Sterling, the CEO. Victoria was everything I wasn't, born into wealth, connected to all the right people, and absolutely ruthless when it came to getting what she wanted. She had inherited her position when her father retired, and she made sure everyone knew that she was in charge. From the moment I started at Wellington Industries, Victoria seemed to view me as some kind of threat. Maybe it was because I had earned my position through merit, rather than birthright. Maybe it was because clients specifically requested to work with me instead of going through her usual network of overpaid, underperforming managers. Or maybe it was simply because she enjoyed having someone to look down on. Whatever the reason, Victoria made it clear from day one that she didn't think I belonged in her world of corporate excellence. The tension between us had been building for months. She would schedule important meetings during my presentations, reassign my biggest clients to less qualified colleagues, and find ways to exclude me from strategic planning sessions. But I kept my head down and focused on my work, believing that my results would eventually speak louder than her petty office politics. I thought that if I just worked harder and delivered better outcomes, she would have to acknowledge my value to the company. How wrong I was. The morning that changed everything started like any other day. I arrived at the office early, as I always did, with my usual coffee and the presentation I had been working on for weeks. It was a proposal for expanding our services into the European market, something that could potentially bring in tens of millions of dollars for the company. I had spent countless hours researching market trends, analyzing competitor strategies, and developing a comprehensive plan that I knew could revolutionize our business. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I had scheduled a presentation with the board of directors for 10 o'clock that morning. This was my chance to finally show Victoria and everyone else what I was truly capable of. I had even bought a new suit for the occasion, a sharp navy blue ensemble that made me feel confident and professional. I remember looking at myself in the bathroom mirror that morning and thinking that this might be the day my career finally took off. The boardroom was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a massive mahogany table that could seat 20 people. As I set up my presentation materials, I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that I hadn't experienced since my first day at the company. This was my moment to shine, to prove that I deserved to be taken seriously in this world of high-stakes business decisions. Victoria arrived exactly at 10, flanked by her usual entourage of senior executives and board members. She was wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than I made in a month, and her perfectly styled hair and flawless makeup made her look like she had just stepped out of a business magazine. But there was something in her eyes that made my stomach drop, a coldness that I had seen before, but never this intense. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. "I'm excited to share with you a proposal that could transform Wellington Industries into a global powerhouse." I clicked to my first slide, which showed projected revenue figures that would make any executive's eyes light up. The numbers were impressive, and I could see some of the board members leaning forward with interest. But Victoria wasn't looking at the presentation. She was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't boredom or disinterest. It was something more predatory, like a cat watching a mouse before pouncing. I continued with my presentation, explaining market opportunities, competitive advantages, and implementation strategies. My voice grew more confident as I saw the positive reactions from most of the board members. "The European market represents a $27 billion opportunity," I explained, clicking to a slide showing market analysis data. "Our research indicates that we could capture at least 3% of that market within the first 18 months, which would translate to over $800 million in revenue." Murmurs of approval rippled around the table, and I felt a surge of pride in the thoroughness of my research. That's when Victoria stood up. The room fell silent as she walked slowly around the table, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. "This is very interesting, Sarah," she said, her voice deceptively calm. "Tell me, where exactly did you get these market research figures?" The question caught me off guard, but I was prepared. "I compiled them from multiple industry sources," I replied confidently. "McKinsey reports, European Chamber of Commerce data, and direct surveys with potential clients." Victoria smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "How thorough of you. And I suppose you did all this research on company time, using company resources?" I nodded, not understanding where this was going. "Of course, this project has been my primary focus for the past 2 months, as we discussed in our planning meetings." The silence in the room was becoming uncomfortable. Several board members were looking back and forth between Victoria and me, clearly sensing tension but not understanding its source. "Well, that's interesting," Victoria continued, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Because, according to our IT department, you've been accessing confidential client information and competitor intelligence that was far beyond your authorization level." My blood ran cold. "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" I stammered, suddenly feeling like the room was spinning. "I used only the resources that were made available to me through normal channels." Victoria pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the table with a dramatic thud. "This folder contains evidence of your unauthorized access to classified company information, including client financial data and proprietary market research that belongs to our competitors. Information that you clearly used to compile this presentation." I felt like I was going to be sick. "Victoria, I have no idea what you're talking about. Everything I used was legitimate research from publicly available sources and data that was specifically provided to me for this project." But Victoria wasn't finished. She opened the folder and began pulling out printed emails and access logs. "These logs show that your computer accessed the Henderson Industries database 47 times over the past month. Henderson Industries, as you well know, is one of our biggest competitors. Can you explain why you needed to access their proprietary information?" My hands were shaking now. I never accessed any Henderson Industries database. I don't even have the passwords for that system. And yet, here are the logs, clearly showing your user ID and computer accessing information that you had no business looking at. Victoria's voice was growing louder, and I could see that she was putting on a show for the board members. "This is corporate espionage, Sarah. This is theft of proprietary information. This is grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Board members were looking at me like I was some kind of criminal, and I felt completely blindsided by accusations that made no sense. "Victoria, please, let me explain," I said, my voice cracking with desperation. "I would never steal information from competitors or access unauthorized databases. There has to be some kind of mistake." But Victoria was already motioning to someone standing by the door. 2 security guards entered the boardroom, and my heart sank completely. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a mistake. This was a setup. "Sarah Mitchell," Victoria announced to the entire room, her voice filled with theatrical outrage. You are terminated immediately for corporate espionage, theft of proprietary information, and violation of your employment contract. Security will escort you from the building, and your access to all company systems has been revoked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. 3 years of dedicated service, countless late nights, missed holidays with my family, and all the success I had brought to the company. None of it mattered. "You can't be serious," I said, standing up so quickly that my chair fell backward. "This is insane. I've done nothing wrong. This presentation is based on legitimate research that I conducted using approved methods and publicly available information." Victoria's smile turned cruel. "Tell that to the authorities when they investigate your theft of trade secrets. I'm sure they'll be very interested in how a marketing director with no special access somehow managed to compile competitive intelligence that our own research department couldn't obtain." The security guards were already moving toward me, and I realized that arguing was pointless. Victoria had orchestrated this entire situation, and there was nothing I could say or do that would change her mind. The board members were looking at me with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust, clearly believing Victoria's accusations without question. I was completely alone in a room full of people who had already decided I was guilty. "Please gather your personal belongings," one of the security guards said, not unkindly, but with the firm authority of someone who was used to escorting people out of buildings. "You have 15 minutes to clean out your office." I looked around the room one last time, hoping to see at least one friendly face, someone who might question what was happening. But everyone was avoiding eye contact, probably afraid that associating with me might somehow damage their own careers. As I walked out of the boardroom with security guards flanking me, I could hear Victoria addressing the remaining board members. "I want everyone to understand that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated at Wellington Industries. We have built our reputation on integrity and ethical business practices, and anyone who threatens that reputation will be dealt with swiftly and decisively." Her words felt like knives in my back, especially since she was the one who had just destroyed my reputation with false accusations. The walk to my office felt like the longest journey of my life. Every employee we passed stopped what they were doing to stare, and I could see the whispers starting already. By the end of the day, everyone in the building would know that Sarah Mitchell had been fired for corporate espionage. The story would spread to other companies, other industry contacts, and soon my entire professional reputation would be in ruins. My office looked smaller somehow, as if the accusations had physically shrunk the space where I had spent so many productive hours. My diplomas hung on the wall, my MBA from Northwestern, my bachelor's degree in marketing, my various professional certifications. All of that education and hard work suddenly felt meaningless. I began packing my personal items into the cardboard box that security had provided, each object feeling heavier than it should have. There was the coffee mug my nephew had made for me in art class, with "World's Best Aunt" painted in crooked letters. The small potted plant that I had nursed back to health after finding it wilting in the break room. Photos of my family at various holidays and celebrations. These simple personal items were all I had left of my professional life, and even they felt tainted by the circumstances of my departure. As I packed, I kept replaying the morning's events in my mind, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The accusations made no sense. I had never accessed any unauthorized databases, and I certainly had never stolen proprietary information from competitors. The research for my presentation had been compiled from legitimate sources, and I had documentation to prove it. But clearly Victoria had manufactured evidence to make it look like I had done something wrong. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Victoria had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. She had set me up to fail, probably having her IT department create false access logs and plant evidence that would make me look guilty of corporate espionage. All of my hard work, all of my dedication to the company, had been meaningless because Victoria had decided that I was a threat that needed to be eliminated. When I finally finished packing my belongings, my hands were trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation. The security guards escorted me through the main office area past dozens of my former colleagues who couldn't even look me in the eye. Some were whispering behind their computers. Others were pretending to be busy with work, but I could feel their judgment weighing on me like a heavy blanket. 3 years of building relationships, earning respect, and proving my worth had been erased in a single morning. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt eternal. One of the security guards kept checking his watch, probably eager to get this unpleasant task over with. The other one kept glancing at me with what might have been sympathy, but I was too devastated to care about anyone's pity. All I could think about was how I was going to explain this to my family, to my friends, to future employers who would inevitably hear about my termination for corporate espionage. As we reached the ground floor, I realized that my entire professional identity had been stripped away in less than an hour. I wasn't Sarah Mitchell, successful marketing director anymore. I was Sarah Mitchell, disgraced former employee who had been accused of stealing trade secrets. The weight of that transformation felt crushing, like my entire sense of self had been built on quicksand, and Victoria had just pulled away the foundation. The lobby of Wellington Industries was bustling with the usual morning activity. Clients were arriving for meetings, delivery people were bringing packages, and employees were grabbing coffee from the expensive espresso machine near the reception desk. Life was continuing as normal for everyone else, while my world had just completely collapsed. I wanted to scream at all of them, to tell them that I was innocent, that I had been set up by a vindictive CEO who couldn't stand the idea of someone succeeding on merit rather than connections. But instead, I walked silently between the security guards, clutching my pathetic cardboard box of personal belongings and trying not to cry in front of strangers. The morning sunshine felt harsh and unwelcoming as we stepped outside, like even the weather was judging me for my supposed crimes. I had arrived at work that morning full of hope and ambition, and now I was leaving in disgrace, with no idea how I was going to rebuild my career from this devastating blow. One of the security guards handed me a sealed envelope. "This contains information about your final paycheck and benefits termination," he said in a neutral tone. "You'll also need to return your company credit card and parking pass." I fumbled through my purse, finding the items he mentioned and handing them over. Each surrendered item felt like another piece of my professional life being taken away from me. As the security guards turned to go back inside, I stood alone on the sidewalk, holding my box of belongings and feeling more lost than I had ever felt in my entire life. People walked past me without a second glance, probably assuming I was just another employee starting a new job somewhere else. They had no idea that I was actually watching my career crumble before my eyes, the victim of a calculated attack by someone who had the power to rewrite history and make lies look like truth. I called my best friend Emma from my cell phone, my voice breaking as I tried to explain what had happened. "They fired me for corporate espionage," I managed to say between tears. "Victoria accused me of stealing trade secrets and had security escort me out like I was some kind of criminal." Emma was shocked and immediately offered to come pick me up, but I told her I needed some time alone to process what had happened. Instead, I drove aimlessly around the city for hours, trying to figure out what I was going to do next. Every job application I might submit would require references from Wellington Industries. Every interview would inevitably include questions about why I had left my previous position. How could I possibly explain that I had been falsely accused of corporate espionage without sounding defensive or unreliable? Victoria had effectively ended my career with her lies, and there seemed to be no way to fight back against someone with her level of power and influence. By afternoon, I had driven to the small park where I used to go during lunch breaks when I needed to clear my head. I sat on a bench overlooking the pond, watching ducks paddle around in circles, and wondering if my life would ever make sense again. That's when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something made me pick up. "Sarah? This is James Thompson. I heard about what happened at Wellington Industries today." The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" I asked, wiping tears from my eyes and trying to sound more composed than I felt. "We met briefly at the Morrison Industries conference last month. I'm the CEO of Thompson Enterprises. I was very impressed by your presentation on digital marketing strategies." The memory came flooding back. James Thompson had approached me after my presentation and asked for my business card, saying he might have opportunities for someone with my expertise. He was younger than most CEOs I had met, probably in his early 30s, with an easy smile and genuine interest in innovative marketing approaches. But I had been so focused on my work at Wellington Industries that I hadn't followed up on his interest. "I've been hearing some very disturbing rumors about your departure from Wellington Industries," James continued. "Would you be willing to meet with me this afternoon? I think you might be interested in what I have to offer." Part of me was suspicious. How had he heard about my termination so quickly? And why would he want to meet with someone who had just been fired for corporate espionage? But another part of me was desperate for any opportunity to salvage my career. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, away from the business district where I might run into former colleagues or clients. I spent the remaining hour trying to compose myself, practicing explanations for what had happened, and hoping that James Thompson might be willing to hear my side of the story. When I arrived at the coffee shop, he was already there, wearing a casual suit and looking much more relaxed than I remembered from our brief conference encounter. "Thank you for agreeing to meet on such short notice," he said, standing up to shake my hand. "I know you've had a difficult day, but I wanted to discuss something important with you." His demeanor was professional but warm, and I found myself feeling slightly more hopeful than I had since leaving Wellington Industries that morning. "I should probably explain what happened," I began, but he held up his hand to stop me. "Actually, I think I know exactly what happened," he said with a slight smile. "Victoria Sterling has a reputation in this industry for eliminating people she perceives as threats. You're not the first talented professional she's destroyed with false accusations, and unfortunately, you probably won't be the last." His words hit me like a revelation. "You mean other people have gone through this?" I asked, feeling a mixture of relief and anger. James nodded grimly. "Victoria inherited her position and her power, but she's always been insecure about her own abilities. When someone like you comes along, someone with real talent and genuine results, she sees it as a direct challenge to her authority. So she manufactures reasons to eliminate the competition." Hearing this explanation made perfect sense of everything that had happened, but it also made me furious that Victoria could continue getting away with this kind of behavior. "The problem is that she's very good at covering her tracks," James continued. "She has loyal IT staff who can create whatever digital evidence she needs, and board members who trust her implicitly because of her family connections. Fighting her accusations directly would be almost impossible, especially for someone without significant resources or influence." I felt my heart sinking again. If what he was saying was true, then my career really was over, and there was no way to clear my name. But then James leaned forward with an expression that made me pay closer attention. "However, there might be another way to handle this situation. Tell me, Sarah, what do you know about Thompson Enterprises?" I admitted that I knew very little beyond what I had learned at the conference. "We're a relatively new company, but we've been growing extremely rapidly. In fact, we're in the process of acquiring several smaller firms to expand our market presence." He paused as if considering his next words carefully. "One of the companies we're looking at acquiring is Wellington Industries. Victoria doesn't know it yet, but her company is in serious financial trouble. They've been losing clients and market share for months, and their stock price has dropped by 30% in the past quarter. The board is getting desperate for solutions, and they're starting to question Victoria's leadership." I was intrigued but confused about where this conversation was heading. "What does this have to do with me?" I asked. James smiled, and suddenly I understood why he had been so successful at such a young age. There was something magnetic about his confidence, something that made you want to be part of whatever vision he was pursuing. "I want to offer you a position as Vice President of Strategic Development at Thompson Enterprises," he said. "It would be a significant promotion from your previous role, with a salary that's nearly double what you were making at Wellington Industries, but more importantly, it would put you in a position to help us evaluate potential acquisitions, including companies like Wellington Industries." The offer was incredible, almost too good to be true, but I was still reeling from the morning's events and struggling to trust anything that seemed too perfect. "Why would you want to hire someone who just got fired for corporate espionage?" I asked. "Aren't you concerned about the accusations against me?" James laughed, but not in a mocking way. "Sarah, I've done my research on you. Your track record speaks for itself. The clients you brought to Wellington Industries, the campaigns you developed, the revenue you generated, those results don't lie. Victoria may have manufactured evidence to make you look guilty of stealing trade secrets, but she couldn't manufacture 3 years of outstanding performance reviews and satisfied clients." He pulled out a tablet and showed me a document that made my eyes widen. It was a detailed analysis of my professional accomplishments, including specific revenue figures and client satisfaction scores, that I didn't even remember sharing with anyone outside of Wellington Industries. "How did you get this information?" I asked, amazed at the thoroughness of his research. "Let's just say that not everyone at Wellington Industries is loyal to Victoria Sterling," he said with a knowing smile. "There are quite a few people who were appalled by what happened to you today, and some of them were willing to share information about your real contributions to the company. You have allies you don't even know about, Sarah. People who recognize your talent and are disgusted by the way you were treated." The idea that people I had worked with were already speaking out on my behalf was both comforting and overwhelming. I had felt so isolated during my termination, so convinced that everyone believed Victoria's lies about me. Learning that there were colleagues who knew the truth and were willing to defend my reputation gave me hope that my career might not be over after all. "I need to be honest with you about something," James continued, his expression becoming more serious. "This isn't just a job offer, it's an opportunity for justice. If you accept this position, you'll be in a unique position to help expose Victoria's pattern of destroying talented employees. The acquisition of Wellington Industries would require a thorough review of their business practices, including their human resources policies and treatment of staff." The implications of what he was suggesting began to sink in. This wasn't just about getting a new job. It was about having the power to investigate the company that had wronged me, and potentially preventing Victoria from destroying other careers the way she had tried to destroy mine. The idea of turning the tables on someone who had seemed so untouchable just hours earlier was almost intoxicating. "I want you to think about this carefully," James said, handing me a business card with his direct contact information. "This offer comes with significant responsibility and the potential for both professional growth and personal satisfaction. But it also means you'll be walking back into a situation where you'll face Victoria Sterling again, this time from a position of strength rather than vulnerability." I looked at the business card, noting the elegant design and the impressive list of credentials below James's name. Thomson Enterprises wasn't just a small startup, it was a rapidly growing corporation with offices in multiple cities and a reputation for innovative business practices. Working there would mean stepping into a completely different league of professional opportunities. What exactly would my responsibilities include? I asked, trying to focus on the practical aspects of the offer rather than the emotional appeal of getting revenge on Victoria. James outlined a role that would involve analyzing potential acquisitions, developing integration strategies, and overseeing the due diligence process for companies that Thomson Enterprises was considering adding to its portfolio. You'd have a team of analysts working under you, access to resources that most companies can only dream of, and the authority to make recommendations that could affect millions of dollars in business decisions, he explained. "It's the kind of position that most professionals spend decades working toward, and I'm offering it to you based on your demonstrated abilities and potential." The scope of the opportunity was staggering. Not only would I be recovering from the career-ending blow that Victoria had dealt me, but I would actually be advancing to a level of responsibility and influence that I had never imagined possible. It felt like being offered a chance to leap from the wreckage of my professional life directly into a position of real power and significance. As we finished our conversation, James mentioned one final detail that made everything feel surreal. "By the way, there's something I should probably mention. My last name isn't Thomson because I founded Thomson Enterprises. It's Thomson because I married into the family that built this company. My wife inherited the business from her grandfather, and she asked me to take over operations when we got married 2 years ago." The revelation added another layer of complexity to an already incredible situation. James wasn't just offering me a job. He was representing a family business with deep roots and significant resources. The idea that I might be walking into a situation where I had the backing of generational wealth and influence was both thrilling and intimidating. As I drove home that evening, my mind was spinning with possibilities I couldn't have imagined when I woke up that morning. The day that had started as my worst nightmare was ending with an opportunity that seemed almost too good to be true, but something in James's demeanor had convinced me that his offer was genuine, and that Thomson Enterprises really could provide the platform I needed to rebuild my career and get justice for what Victoria had done to me. That night, I called my parents to tell them about both the devastating termination and the unexpected job offer. My mother was furious about Victoria's behavior and immediately started planning ways to support me through the transition. My father, always the practical one, advised me to carefully research Thomson Enterprises before making any decisions, but he also acknowledged that the opportunity sounded incredible. The next morning, I called James Thompson and accepted his offer. Within hours, I had signed a contract that not only provided me with financial security and professional growth, but also positioned me to investigate the company that had tried to destroy my career. As I prepared for my first day at Thompson Enterprises, I realized that Victoria Sterling had no idea what she had set in motion when she decided to eliminate me as a threat. Sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up giving you exactly the motivation and opportunity you need to rise higher than you ever thought possible. Victoria thought she was ending my career, but instead she had inadvertently launched me into a position where I could ensure that justice was served and that other talented professionals wouldn't suffer the same fate I had experienced. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.